Part 127. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1262. The assassin who entered the ghost transformation suddenly appeared and swung the dagger in his hand towards his neck. The city lord was extremely calm at the critical moment. He was about to turn around and pick up the sword, but an electric grid appeared above his head. Zizzy in the sound of electric current, although these electric currents failed to kill the city lord, and even did not cause much damage to him, they succeeded in making him pause. In anger, the city lord turned his head to look in Lily's direction, and Liu Qingzi's healing technique suddenly hit his eyes. In an instant, light burst out, and the assassin who had been hiding for a long time came out, wiping a dagger towards the city lord's neck. The moment he heard the sound of the wind, the city lord's eyes had not yet recovered, but his body was gradually recovering from the damage caused by the electric current. He raised the long sword in his hand to chase the assassin in the direction, but Qing Ji, who had already arrived behind him, put the long sword on his neck while he was chasing the assassin. Before the city lord had time to dodge, Qing Ji with quick eyes and quick hands, Ji pulled the long sword and turned his body. The long sword followed his turning movement, and there was a chi-la sound, and a large amount of blood spurted out, all over Qing Ji's body. Yes. I'm angry, TNC City Lord suffered such a serious injury. Not only did it not affect his mobility, but his voice became colder. Lily did not expect that Kinga failed to kill the City Lord this time, but instead angered him. She couldn't help but his brows jumped up. Several people's ears rang in unison. TNC City Lord Zhanwuji was enraged and entered a violent state. Attack add 50%, agility add 50%, speed add 50%, defense add 50%, damage add 50%. Other attributes are fully improved. As soon as the system beep sounded, everyone turned to look at each other with helpless and depressed expressions in their eyes. As the TNC City Lord's combat power improved, he quickly applied healing medicine to the wounds on his body. The bleeding stopped immediately. The City Lord changed his attack method, and his attack power became much more powerful. When the assassin stepped forward and wanted to make a sneak attack, before anyone arrived, the long sword in his hand snatched a circle of sword energy and knocked the assassin out hard. Only the sound of bones breaking was heard, and the assassin's body bounced like a kite with its string broken. After flying out, soldiers not far away surrounded him and held him up. As soon as the attack attribute of the City Lord increased, the assassin and Li Yuan were restricted in the melee profession. Seeing that the assassin was injured, Li Yuan could not care about the City Lord. He quickly dived towards the assassin. He couldn't let the assassin fall into the hands of the soldiers of TNC City. Based on what everyone had committed today, if the assassin was caught, what he said before about being imprisoned would no longer be a joke. Although this Qing Ji is still blocking, there was originally a level of suppression between Zhanwuji and Qing Ji. In addition, after the Lord of TNC City was injured and entered a violent state, various attribute values increased significantly. Qing Ji would inevitably face shame when he resisted. There was a bit of solemnity on his face. It's equivalent to his current PK with Zhanwuji. The energy spent on each move is probably more than half as much as when he is piking with others. Although Liu Qingzi's healing skills kept on releasing. And he also tried to sneak attack TNC City Lord again, but Zhanwuji became very cautious after being fooled once. Once he was prepared, it would be very difficult for Liu Qingzi's tricks to cause trouble to him again. But Zhanwuji probably disliked Liu Qingzi being in the way, so he simply stamped the tip of his sword on the ground, causing the TNC City to shake a few times. When everyone was unsteady, Zhanwuji shouted loudly, "Rise!" While he was speaking, the stones in the ground were moved by the sword energy. Twisted. It turned into sharp swords and grew rapidly upwards. This process seemed to have sprung up hundreds of times, but each one carried the power of killing. Lily hurriedly dodged, This move was mainly aimed at Liu Qingzi. Lily could avoid it, but Liu Qingzi couldn't. The spikes sprouted out from under his feet one by one. He couldn't dodge, and the soles of his feet were pierced by thorns. Although he avoided the vital points, he was still covered in scars when he escaped from Zhang Wuji's attack range, and he was caught up all at once. Soldiers surrounded him. Seeing such a scene, Lily's heart sank. 2 of the people who made trouble today have been arrested. Although Li Yuan is still hidden, he can't beat the 4 hands with 2 fists. Zhang Wuji's attributes increased a lot after his rage. Although Qing Ji is still there, if we don't escape under such circumstances, and if the situation is not broken over time, everyone will be dead. Zhang Wuji saw that the ground stab move was very useful, so he followed the same example and once again used this move on a large scale. In order to force Li Yuan out, he used this move, but it gave Lily a wake-up call. Since entering the game, she has used the 5 Thunder Curse. Although it was improved in the later stage into the Power Grid, a group attack move suitable for killing monsters in the game, she usually used to cover the Power Grid from top to bottom. At this time, Zhang Wuji's ground stab skill instead, she had a flash of inspiration and thought that she could also try spreading the lightning technique from the bottom of her feet upwards. If the Power Grid is covered from top to bottom, a person with high agility may be able to escape, but if it is covered from bottom to top, unless he has wings, he will not be able to escape even with wings. She doesn't need to kill many people with this move. At most, it has the same effect as Liu Qingzi's healing technique just now, which is to slow down Zhang Wuji and give Kinga an opportunity. Lily thought of the 5-pointed star array she saw in the temple before and licked her lips. This was the first time she tried to use such a trick to cast the original 5 Thunder Curse in a wide range. She threw the wand in her hand, and the spiritual power in her body began to surge uncontrollably. She input most of the spiritual power with her hands, and used the wand she threw in the air to double the lethality, and a large current surged. It rushed into the ground, with Lily as the center, and spread out in all directions. Silver lightning flashed wildly in the ground, and many soldiers were staggered by the electric shock. The system prompts ringing in Lily's ears almost drowned out the voices of players who came to watch the excitement and cursed Lily. The soldiers who had just captured the assassin, Liu Qingzi, were unsteady on their feet. Under the attack of thunder and lightning, their bodies were numb. The assassin who was originally captured had already passed the time for the Ghost Tribe's special skill Ghost Transformation, but he had just been captured. The soldier was restrained from moving. When he got the chance, he twisted his body, ducked and disappeared, and ran away. Liu Qingzi also escaped from the place where a large number of soldiers were gathered with the help of Li Yuan. The Lord Tianxi jumped up at the critical moment and faced Qing Ji, but he caught the opportunity and stabbed his eyes with the tip of the sword. Lily saw that this trick worked, and when the lightning was over, a large amount of electricity poured into the ground again. "What the hell, are you still here?" The people around watching the excitement were cursing again and again. Many soldiers were entangled in the electric current. At this time, they were convulsed by the electricity. Although Tianxi City Lord escaped the first wave of electric current, he could not escape the second wave when he was forced to the ground by Qing Ji. Bo's legs were numb due to the electric shock. When Qing Ji attacked again, the City Lord rarely showed a bit of reluctance. Lily struck while the iron was hot, drew out the last bit of spiritual power in her body, turned into a fire dragon and entangled this man. In the sky full of fire, Qing Ji grabbed the sword of exile and rushed towards him. With a soft sound, the long sword in his hand penetrated half of Zhang Wuji's neck. With a flick of his wrist, Zhang Wuji half the head tilted to the side, unable to see any more, and the system prompt sounded. "Things are changing, who is the hero? There are talents for generations. Tianxi City is about to usher in a new master." Player Qing Ji kills Zhang Wuji, the City Lord of Tianxi City, and becomes the first successor City Lord in Interstellar Overlord. Congratulations to player Qing Ji for becoming the city lord of TNC City. The laws of TNC City will be rewritten from now on. From then on, Interstellar Overlord will fully enter a new era and the City Lord's Order mission will be officially launched. Many soldiers around them lowered their swords. Liu Qingzi and others opened their mouths and gasped, with joy in their eyes as they survived the disaster. After killing the City Lord last time and Qing Ji taking over TNC City, several days passed before Liu Qingzi and the others recovered from their injuries. The assassin was the most seriously injured. Zhang Wuji attacked him and broke several of his ribs. It was all broken, but it was Lily who made several top-quality healing pills for him to take before he recovered so quickly. After everyone recovered from their injuries, they couldn't help but talk about the Lost Land again. In the past few days, neither of the two people in the team could move, and the mission in the Lost Lands was not time-limited, so everyone was not in a hurry. However, now that their injuries have healed, everyone is ready to start planning the route. As Qing Ji said, Medusa has magical eyes, and anyone seen by her eyes will turn into stone statues. Liu Qingzi talked about the information he had found, and was a little confused. Kinga, do you really think what the high priest said is true? I don't see how Medusa in the Lost Land has anything to do with the hidden race mission, and Medusa is the 85 boss. In principle, she is 5 levels higher than the original Godsend City Lord, but she is far higher than the Lord of TNC City is much more vicious. The assassin actually doubted the authenticity of Emily's words. I think Emily might have deliberately talked nonsense because she was threatened by Lily, and wanted to lead us to death. After all, the lost in the ground, ordinary snakes are level 65, and they are extremely venomous, no less harmful than the nests of red ants. I think it is too early for us to go now. As soon as the assassin said these words, Qing Ji frowned. The level is indeed low now, but when our level is high, others will only be higher than us. A group of people are not mainly focused on leveling. The most important thing is that the Lost Land will always exist, and ordinary level 65 snakes will also. It will be refreshed within a certain period of time after death, but there is only one Snake Queen Medusa. If someone kills Medusa first, then if everyone wants to wait for Medusa to appear, they will have to wait until the new Snake Queen appears. At that time, I didn't know how long I had to wait. Now that the battle for City Lord is open in the game, it is conceivable that the killings in the game will be more fierce and brutal in the future, and Qing Ji will not wait any longer. Ask for votes and sponsors. Happy Valentine's Day everyone. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1263. Everyone knows his character, and after hearing what he said, they have already guessed that Kinga's attitude is that he must go to the Lost Land. Li Yuan and others were mainly focused on Qing Ji. Although it was originally suggested that it would be better to go later, since he insisted on going, everyone had no choice but to fight. As the assassin studied the map, Lily glanced at a few people and suddenly said, "If you ask me, what Emily said is probably true." As soon as she spoke, the eyes of the assassin and others fell on Lily. The killing of the former city lord Zhang Wuji last time made Lily completely integrate into the team. When she spoke now, the assassin couldn't help but ask, "How do you know?" None of us know what Medusa looks like, but one thing we know is that Medusa has magical eyes, and anyone seen by her eyes will turn into stone. The assassin and others nodded. Qing Ji frowned. Suo, after hearing this, seemed to understand something, and curled up the corners of his mouth without making a sound. Kinga also told Emily that the reason why she was blind was related to Medusa's enchanted pupils. Emily was very angry at that time. Emily's behavior was very much like being raped by someone. After hitting a sore spot, she reacted in anger, which meant that Kinga's casual remarks at that time were most likely telling the truth, which is why she was so angry. From the perspective of the magic eyes, Medusa should be an offensive boss of the spell system. However, no one has seen Medusa, but some players accidentally broke into the Lost Land at the beginning. The snakes in the Lost Land it is highly toxic and not weak in aggression. Generally speaking, since Medusa is the queen of the snake tribe, it is very likely that she also evolved from snakes, just like the queen of ants. The prototype is definitely a snake. The attacks of ordinary snakes are very similar to physical attacks, but since Medusa has spell attacks, the two are not compatible. So I doubt it. Medusa is most likely what Emily said, the fallen one, the crowd is one of a kind. That's why Emily will hate her with all her heart, and she will be so angry when she mentions the hidden race. When Lily said this, the assassin and others fell silent. After a while, she continued, if my speculation is true, then Medusa may also be a type of mutant race for this group of aborigines in the game. The hidden race in the eyes of the player, maybe it is the unstable factor in their eyes, that is, the mutated fallen clan. If Medusa really has magical abilities after mutating her physical attacks, then it's not surprising that she is in charge of the seal of the hidden race. When Lily said this, she paused, but these are just speculations. They cannot be taken to be true. We have to go and take a look at the truth. There is a lot of competition in the game. Staying in TNC City, and now Kinga is holding the position of City Lord. Although it is safe and his reputation is well known in the game, if he hesitates to move forward and does things before and after. The game has now opened the City Lord's order system, and one day Ching Ji will be replaced by someone else. What's more, Lily also believes that Ching Ji is not the kind of person who just waits for death for the benefit in front of him. In this case, let's go prepare some things. If the Lost Land is treated as a red ant nest, then everyone will stay there for at least a year after entering the Lost Land. Medicines, materials, etc. are all indispensable. Weapons and equipment can be repaired in the Lost Land, but raw materials are still needed, and food, etc. also need to be prepared. Ching Ji nodded, and everyone was about to disperse. The communicator on the assassin's waist rang. He glanced at it and looked a little embarrassed. It's Dan K. The mage named Dan Cai originally hung out with Ching Ji and others for a while, but after Dan Cai left, a Lily was added to the team. Now that she wants to return to the team, everyone will inevitably be a little embarrassed. Lily heard this. Recalling the scene when he saw the beautiful female mage in the store, she was full of hostility towards him. Judging from the scene that day, it is not difficult to understand that the female mage might have some thoughts about Ching Ji. She seemed to be smiling but not smiling. Li Yuan glanced at Ching Ji. When she was in the red ant nest, Ching Ji saved her once. Afterwards, everyone in the team had almost acquiesced in the relationship between the two. At this time, Li Yuan saw that Lily did not speak and only stared at Ching Ji. The look in his eyes made his scalp numb, and he couldn't help but find an excuse to escape. The remaining Lu Qingzi also hid quickly, leaving the assassin alone to hold the communicator that kept flashing and answer the call. Dan K wanted to join Kinga after learning that the assassins and others had conquered TNC City. When the assassin rejected her and said that the group was about to go to the Lost Land, Dan K also asked to join the team. She missed the red ant nest last time. As a result, not only did she miss a good opportunity to upgrade, but Ching Ji, who was not close to her in the first place, seemed to be much further away. A year ago, her level was still higher than many people in the game. Unexpectedly, because of being so late, Kinga and others entered the underground lair. When they came out again, the red ants in the underground lair had much higher experience points. Due to ordinary monsters, her current level is far behind Ching Ji and others. She is only level 56 now, neither above nor below. It is conceivable that if her level cannot keep up, the strength gap between her and Kinga and others will become wider and wider in the future, and they will spend less time together. So when she heard the assassin talking about this good opportunity, of course she couldn't miss it. Without any baggage. When the assassin made a request on behalf of Dan K, Kinga refused without thinking. Lily heard clearly from the side, "It's really direct." Although she said this with a smile, even the assassin could hear the unkindness in her tone. The two people in the city lord's mansion were sitting side by side. Kinga reached out and grabbed her hand on the table. He pulled Lily into his arms with only a slight force. "Some things are better to be explained clearly directly." The assassin turned around. When I looked at it, I saw Lily, who was usually cold and talkative, sitting on Kinga's lap, with her waist wrapped in his arms. Anyone with a discerning eye could see what Dankay had towards Kinga. Kinga never being ambiguous with others, and now being able to treat Lily differently, I also know that Dankay is out of luck. Both Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi could tell that there was something wrong between the two of them, so they knew how to hide. Only they were thinking about their old relationship and getting involved with her. Now Qing Ji has behaved like this, obviously he doesn't like Dan Cai to be entangled anymore. The assassin sighed inwardly, said a few words to Dankay on the other end of the communication, and then hung up. The Lost Land is located in the west of Tianxi City. Kinga used his identity as the Lord of Tianxi City to hire mounts in the city. By the time a few people arrived at the Lost Land, it was already several hours in the game. Outside the Lost Land is a large area of sand, and it seems that there is no end in sight for a moment. Behind the dilapidated threshold is a large area of abandoned city. It is said that this place was the original temple in the game. Earlier the assassin revealed the information he had found out. I just don't know why. Later, Shenduan moved to Tianxi City, and this place became deserted. Over time, it formed a from the Lost Land. Medusa appears. As soon as he finished speaking, the system prompt sounded in several people's ears at the same time. Ding. Find out the reason for the temple's relocation. This is not a task assigned by NPC, but a task directly forced by the system, and there is no chance for Lily and others to choose. When Lily heard the system prompt sound, she took her task scroll and looked at it. Sure enough, she saw the boss. There are a few big golden characters written on it. Find out the reason for the relocation of the temple. If you complete it, you can escape from the Lost Land. If you fail, you will be trapped in the Lost Land. In other words, this mandatory mission must be completed once it is started. If it cannot be completed, everyone will be trapped in the Lost Land forever. She put the mission scroll back into the package. The others had similar expressions, obviously they had received the same mission. As soon as the few people received the mission, the scene suddenly changed. From the yellow sand on the ground, it suddenly turned into ruins. It was obvious that they had entered the Lost Land. Sure enough, when Lily checked where this place was, the system prompted, "You are in the Lost Land." She tried to exit the game again, but the system warned, "You are in the Lost Land, and you must leave this place to exit the game." "We can't get out." Lily tried once, but after finding out that it was just as she suspected, she stopped trying and turned to the others with a wry smile. Qing Ji obviously received the same prompt. He did not speak. Instead, Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi tried. The assassin frowned, and before he could speak, a hissing sound came out. Dark green vines suddenly hung down from the stone beam above the head. The vines moved automatically without any wind. When they approached the assassin, they opened their mouths with a revealing two ferocious fangs, and bit the assassin's face. The incident happened between lightning and flint. Lu Qingzi shouted, "Be careful." The assassin turned into a ghost and disappeared from the spot. The thin snake fell into the air. Li Yuan held up a dagger and raised the knife to cut the thin snake. The snake was cut in two. "It's okay," Li Yuan smiled, but Lily shook her head. It was too easy for Li Yuan to kill the snake. Since the Lost Land has such a famous reputation, the monsters inside can't be so easy to deal with. What's more, if the snake was really killed by Li Yuan, the system should send a notification sound. But at this moment, no sound was heard. Li Yuan was still smiling and turning the dagger in his hand, but Lily's eyes had already discovered that the body of the little snake that had been cut into two pieces on the ground was twisting in place, and the sudden break of the two bodies, a snake's head grew out of one side, and a snake's tail grew out of the other side. They turned into two vivid dark green snakes and wrapped around Li Yuan again. "Be careful," Lily shouted. Before Li Yuan lowered his head to look, he instinctively hid. The long sword in Qing Ji's hand was thrown towards the thin snake on the ground. The tip of the sword was like a huge star. The nails nailed one of the little snakes to the ground. First update. It's going to be even later today, so I won't ask for votes. The people living downstairs probably thought my house was noisy, so they poked the roof with something, and they're still poking it now. From noon to now? To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Wan Erwr. Chapter 1264. However, the snake kept twisting and turning. The snake's body was cut off by the sharp sword, and there were 3 more snakes on the ground. Li Yuan could see clearly now and couldn't help but said in surprise, "Holy shit, what is this? These snakes cannot be killed at all, and they become 2 snakes when cut in half. If it is cut into 4 pieces, it will become 4 snakes. If it continues like this, won't there be more and more snakes here?" 3 small dark green snakes on the ground squirmed and swam toward Li Yuan again. What was terrible was that the green vines on the stone beams above their heads were now squirming. Everyone looked up and took a closer look. Those dark green snakes looked as thick as arms. What kind of plant was the wisteria? It was clearly made up of countless thin snakes twisted into a ball, and they all began to hiss and fall down. After the little snake fell to the ground, it swam desperately towards Qing Ji and the others. Now it was really troublesome. It couldn't be cut, but it had to fight back. These snakes were extremely venomous, so Lily moved her spirit in desperation. He spread the power grid on the ground with all his strength. Amidst the sizzling sound of electricity, these little snakes were only slightly injured and swam towards a few people desperately. Lily cast 3 or 4 power grids in a row before finally killing 2 of them. A little snake. Congratulations on killing the cursed green snake and gaining 767 experience points. The system beeped twice, but several people did not cheer because of the super high experience value. After all, Lily's spiritual power was mostly empty after the power grid was disconnected these few times. No matter how high the snake's experience value was, it was difficult to kill. It seems that things are a bit tricky. Everyone felt a little heavy, and while they were stunned, a small green snake rose into the air and flew towards Lily. Although Lily threw out thunder and lightning and hit the snake twisted around when it fell. It wrapped around her wrist. She raised her arms and flicked it. The snake's tail wrapped around her wrist, but she didn't shake it off at the first blow. Instead, he opened his mouth and bit her wrist. "You were bitten by the cursed green snake." The bitten part first felt a sharp pain like being stung by a bee, and then a large green mark spread around the wrist. The originally white skin on Lily's wrist now looked like tree bark. Yes, her face turned pale. Qing Ji, who was on the side, reached out and grabbed the little snake, threw it to the ground with all his strength, and then stepped on it hard. Half of the snake's body was broken by him and turned into mud. The remaining half of the body swayed and turned into a snake again. The little snake rushed over again. Even though he knew that cutting the snake would break into 2 pieces, Kinga didn't care about anything else at this moment. He raised his long sword and flew the small snake away. The snake split into 2 pieces in mid-air and rushed towards him again. Run. There are 5 people in the team. 3 of them are physical attacks. Facts have proved that physical attacks have little effect when facing small snakes. They are not afraid of being cut by a knife at all. If they are broken in two, they will not die, but will turn into two small snakes. The team of three, a member who was originally very effective in combat suddenly had no use for him. Although Lu Qingzi is a legal profession, he also uses magic attacks. But he mainly focuses on treatment and attacks as a supplement. Even if he can kill snakes, these cursed green snakes have thick skin and thick flesh. Lily's previous spells cannot easily kill them. Lu Qingzi can do it, but snakes like this there are many, and his two fists are always difficult to beat with four hands. The most important thing is that Lily was poisoned by the curse, and the poison began to spread to the upper part of her arm, and soon it turned from a piece the size of a dove egg to the size of an egg. And it is still spreading to the arms. Everyone couldn't help but start cursing the system at this moment. Once you enter here, there is no way to get out. Everyone has no choice but to escape for the time being. They can only think of ways to deal with these snakes and start over again. Everyone turned around and ran away. Kinga picked up Lily, who was running among the crowd. The small green snake above the head kept falling, and a hissing sound came from the ground. Everyone panicked and scurried around like headless flies. In the middle, Li Yuan and others were completely unable to fight back against the snakes. They could only turn into ghosts and run away behind a few people. This used to be the base of the temple, and no one dared to dig in. After all, there is still the Medusa Snake Queen in this lost land. These green snakes are already so difficult to deal with. If the boss is alerted, there will be no chance of killing the little snakes. After cleaning up, it was really a dead end. Not daring to enter the main building site, Qing Ji could only lead everyone away from places with many stone beams above their heads, especially away from places with green plants to prevent sneak attacks by green snakes. In an empty space that was already filled with yellow sand. The mine stopped. Several stone pillars fell down all around. As time went by, the paint on the stone pillars had become mottled. Kinga first kicked the stone pillar tentatively, and a cursed little green snake came out from the ground. For once, Qing Ji and others did not dare to take action rashly. Only Lily endured the pain and cooperated with Lu Qingzi to kill the green snake with magic. The moment the experience value sounded, Qing Ji's face became a little ugly. His attack power is very high, but no matter how high the attack is, it will not have much effect here. Because of certain restrictions, he cannot take action and can only escape. He watched Lily get hurt, not to mention how unhappy he was. Lu Qingzi will treat her injury. The wound on Lily's arm has become bigger and bigger, and one arm is a little numb. He has taken some healing medicine, but it has no effect. Qing Ji raised Lily's arm and pulled the magic robe onto his arm. The originally beautiful arm was now like rough tree bark. His intimate movements and concerned tone made Li Yuan and others say, as a joke, Lu Qingzi threw several healing spells in succession, but they had no effect at all. I'll give it a try. Lily's bag also contained several top-quality healing potions that she had accidentally refined. She originally wanted to save these for the fight with Medusa, but she didn't expect the attack to go wrong. Use. The best healing medicine was applied on it, and it quickly took effect. The poison on the wound began to be removed. It was only when Lu Qingzi cast the healing spell again that it took effect. Lily felt a little heavy in her heart. A bite from these ordinary snakes would cause so much damage, and it would take several top-quality healing pills to treat it. Everyone entered this lost place and couldn't get out at the moment. It was inevitable that they would have to deal with the little green snake again. What if I get bitten again and there is no best healing medicine? This place is too evil. The assassin wiped his face and felt a little heavy. I can't get out now, and I can't leave offline. Lily needs the best healing medicine to cure her bite, but there are not many top-quality healing medicines. Kinga, what do you think we should do? In the minds of several people, Qing Ji is equivalent to the backbone. As soon as the assassin said these words, everyone turned to stare at Qing Ji. He looked around the ground. The place was full of yellow sand, and there were several fallen objects lying around. A huge stone pillar. He narrowed his eyes. This snake is not afraid of physical attacks, it uses fire attacks. Dig a big pit here and fill it with flammable materials. Seeing that the assassin and others seemed a little confused, Qing Ji said with a cold face, I will go with you to lure some snakes into the pit. Lily and Lu Qingzi attack with magic. If you use fire as an aid and then use magic to attack, it may burn faster. It seems that this is a solution so far, and everyone nodded in agreement. It's just that Lily's spiritual power has been consumed a lot while Kinga and others were digging a hole. Because she was a wounded person, she leaned behind a huge stone pillar. Seeing that no one noticed her, Lily did 2 physical exercises. The technique replenished some of the spiritual power in the body. Soon Kinga and the others dug the hole and went out to lure the monsters. Lily did another physical training technique, and the spiritual power in the body was replenished by more than half. Kinga had already returned first, followed by 7 or 8 small snakes that were meandering and swimming at extremely fast speeds. When he passed by the dug pit, he jumped, and several small snakes followed him, but they fell into the pit halfway. The pit was dug quite deep, and as soon as a few small snakes fell in, Lu Qingzi lit a fire. As the fire raged, several small snakes were burned and couldn't help twisting their bodies. A large amount of black air emerged from the surface of the snake's body. The snake struggled to jump up. Lily covered the surface of the dug pit with an electric grid, and several snakes jumped up. The snake bounced down again, and by the time Li Yuan and the other 2 led the little snake back, 7 or 8 experience points had already sounded in everyone's ears. The snake that Qing Ji lured back at first had been burned to death. This trick really worked. And I don't know why, in this case, the attack power of fire is much higher than that of thunder and lightning. Lily only needs to use the electric grid to stop the little snake that wants to escape from the pit at the necessary moment. Once the snake falls into the pit, he will set fire to attack. This is far safer than before, and it's also much faster. When everyone saw that this move was effective, their spirits were lifted. The first time we attracted monsters was just a test, so we didn't attract many monsters. By the second time, Kinga had a lot of little snakes behind him, and he would run a few steps away from time to time, turn around and use his sword again. He slashed away the energy and split the snake group into 2, then transformed into a larger group of snakes and followed them. The experience points rose steadily. This method was fast and safe. In the end, everyone was no longer in a hurry to find Queen Medusa. It was not until half a month later that several people were easily promoted to a level. The snake has been mostly cleaned up. What makes Lily and others a little strange is that except for the altar not far away from this lost place, everyone has entered this abandoned building complex to attract monsters, especially the main hall. Originally, everyone thought that Medusa would be hiding in the main hall, but everyone went in and wandered around, but did not find Medusa. On the contrary, the snakes in the Lost Land were almost killed, and there were no more snakes in the Lost Land for 2 days. After finding the cursed green snake, everyone felt helpless. Now Medusa can't be found, and she can't get out of this lost place. She has searched every corner, but Medusa seems to have disappeared out of thin air. What to do? Second update. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1265. If this secret is never found, everyone will be trapped in this lost place forever and never be able to get out. You can't get out of the game, and you can't live without the game at the same time. Do we still have an altar that we haven't been to? Lily sat in front of the main hall of the dilapidated temple. Looking over the stone steps in front of the temple, she could vaguely see a tall altar on the opposite side, with a huge goddess on top. Statue. The altar was in full view, and there was nothing else except a statue. Lu Qingzi frowned. I've never been there, but you can tell from a glance that there's nothing there. Go and have a look. Kinga made a decision, and everyone nodded. Now, even if the altar is empty at first glance, everyone has to go there for anything, otherwise staying stuck in this place is not an option. The altar was about 100 meters away from where everyone was. Everyone walked towards the altar. Because all the cursed snakes in the Lost Land were killed, everyone did not encounter danger along the way and went smoothly. Came under the altar. When she looked up from the stone steps in front of the main hall of the temple, she didn't realize how high the altar was. But when she got under the altar, Lily realized that the altar was much higher than she had imagined. Outside. The back of the altar is backed by a cliff, and there is a stone staircase with thousands of steps on each of the other 3 sides that rises straight up to the top of the altar. There are murals carved on the wall next to the stone steps and unknown runes written on them. There are lampposts next to them. However, due to the passage of time, there are no lamp oil or other items inside. Because the whole altar could be seen in a moment, Lily and others did not come here before, but now they all decided to go up and take a look. Several people stepped on the stone stairs and stared around with wary expressions. When the altar was attracting monsters before, no one came here. At this time, the group was guarding against those tiny cursed green snakes coming out. But he walked up 7 or 8 stone stairs in a row without encountering any danger. In other places in the Lost Land, cursed green snakes were everywhere. There were even many green snakes in the main hall of the temple. There was no one around the altar who came to attract monsters, but there was no sign of the green snake at this time. If something goes wrong, it would be a monster. Qing Ji's eyes flashed, he grabbed Lily's hand, and Sprinter and Li Yuan looked up. Looking up, the 2 of them were a little nervous and a little excited, and the corners of their mouths curled up. He ducked in place and entered the state of the assassin's ghost transformation. Once the assassin and Li Yuan were invisible, Lu Qingzi walked in the front, Lily in the middle, and Qing Ji behind. Everyone stared at the 4 directions vigilantly and slowly moved towards the high platform. The reason why I say that everyone is a little nervous right now. It's because the entire Lost Land is full of crises. There are cursed green snakes everywhere, but there are none on the altar. Either there is something to restrain the green snake here, or the place has been cursed. The green snake is occupied by something more powerful, so the creatures are born with the ability to seek good fortune and avoid evil, and dare not come. As for the Medusa that Emily said existed in the Lost Land, Lily and others searched the entire Lost Land except for the altar but could not find it. So it is conceivable that either this thing is not yes, Emily was just talking nonsense that day. Or maybe Medusa is hiding somewhere that few people have found. Emily is the high priest of the temple. There is no need to make such a joke with Lily and others, and if Medusa really exists, it is most likely hidden in this altar. Medusa is the queen of the snake clan, and the cursed green snake is afraid of her. If she hides on the altar, it is not impossible that the cursed green snake would not dare to appear here. Originally Lily and others were trapped in the Lost Land. Can't get out and can't play the game. When they are in trouble, the appearance of Medusa is equivalent to a turn of events for everyone, which naturally makes the group a little excited. Everyone walked cautiously towards the top of the altar, but due to time constraints, the 2 assassins and Li Yuan had already released their ghost transformation state once, but Medusa did not appear until they were about to set foot on the temple. At the top of the altar, everyone was sweating in their hearts. When the assassin and Li Yuan became invisible again, Lu Qingzi took the lead and slowly stepped on the edge of the altar. Get off. Once several people had climbed onto the altar, the scenery on the altar had already come into Lily's eyes. Before Lu Qingzi's feet even stepped on the edge of the altar, a sinister female voice rang out, a sharp sound. When the sound rang out, in addition to the yelling, there was a whoosh sound in the air, and a small green arrow shot into the sky. Lu Qingzi didn't even see the direction of the person who was shooting the arrow, and the arrow was already approaching him. In front of you. He instinctively turned sideways to hide, But Lu Qingzi forgot that he was standing on the edge of the high altar. He was still stepping on the stone ladder. When he wanted to hide, his foot missed the step and his body swayed. 2 times, he was about to roll down the stone steps. If he rolled down, he would definitely die. Qing Ji behind him hit him hard on the waist with an elbow. Lu Qingzi grunted twice and leaned back. His body was hit again and staggered forward, and rolled down onto the altar with a bang sound. Dirty thing, a very fast shadow flashed. Kinga hugged Lily with one hand and kicked Lu Qingzi hard on the ground. His body was kicked up and several small green arrows landed in front of him. At the position where she fell, half of the arrow shaft had already penetrated into the ground, and the tail of the arrow was shaking desperately. Lily turned her head and looked around, but did not see the shadow of Medusa around her. Don't look, she wanted to look for Medusa again, but Kinga's cold voice rang in her ears, and he covered her eyes with a palm. The next moment, Kinga took out the ribbon tightly tied Lily's eyes. She has magical eyes. Once Lily loses sight, her ears are particularly sensitive. She can hear the whirring sound of the wind when something is moving quickly, but the speed is too fast. Sometimes it is in the east and sometimes in the west, and she can't figure out the direction at all. On the other side, Lu Qingzi was kicked away, and the sight of several people standing on the altar clearly angered the Snake Queen, who regarded this place as her territory. In her sinister roar, arrows could not be heard piercing the air, accompanied by the muffled surroundings. With a snort, Lily couldn't help but take off the silk scarf that covered her eyes. She only saw Qing Ji's sinister expression among the afterimages around her. Lu Qingzi's face was in embarrassment at this time, and the healing skills kept being thrown at him. There were already many arrows stuck on the ground. Lily suddenly raised her hand, and a large amount of fire began to spread around the altar with her body as the center as the spiritual power in her body circulated. Lily carefully avoided the place where Qing Ji and Lu Qingzi were staying, and asked Li Yuan and the assassin where they were hiding. She turned the fire around her, and soon the entire sacrificial platform was full of fire. Ah! A woman howled in pain, followed by the sound of sizzling when the flesh was burning on the fire. Along with the smell of burnt meat, in Mieto the moment Cha couldn't help but scream in pain. Kinga had already rushed towards the direction of the sound with a long sword in hand. As soon as Lily retracted her hand, the fire on the ground was instantly extinguished. The originally invisible assassin suddenly appeared, and the sharp dagger suddenly moved in one direction. Where the screams originally came from, a huge snake tail as thick as a bucket and about tens of meters long appeared out of thin air. Before the assassin's dagger could pierce the snake tail swung hard and fell heavily. It hit the assassin's chest. There was a clicking sound of bones breaking, and the assassin was suddenly whipped away by the snake's tail, rushing straight towards the goddess statue not far away. The assassin was seriously injured by this blow, and spit out a large mouthful of blood in mid-air. The snake tail rushed towards the assassin who was taken away. Above the snake tail, a woman with a graceful naked woman's body holding a bow and arrow, took advantage of the assassin. Before he hit the statue of the goddess, he suddenly stopped in front of him, grinned at him, and let out a sharp scream. 2 fierce fangs were exposed at the corner of the woman's mouth, and a pair of green eyes showed a strange light. She was pointed at the assassin. Qing Ji instinctively grasped the long sword in her hand when she moved, but in a second, the sword in his hand, the head that was originally aimed at the woman moved slightly, and suddenly it was aimed at the assassin. The assassin was completely defenseless in mid-air. Although he knew that Medusa had enchanted eyes and could not look directly at her, how could he resist him in mid-air? Before he landed, a woman appeared out of thin air. He instinctively widened his eyes under the tension. Medusa's eyes shone brightly. The woman's sharp screams came. Only those eyes remained in his mind. Her green pupils were shining with a strange green light, and the tiny cursed green snake eyes on her head of snake hair also shone brightly. At that moment, The assassin only heard the system prompt. You are attacked by Medusa and turned to stone. The next moment, a long sword came through the air. Before the assassin could react, he only felt that his body was still falling lightly and his head was already flying. Lily only saw the assassin and Medusa's enchanted eyes. Qing Ji's long sword cut off the assassin's entire head. Just 2 or 3 drops of blood were spilled, and the assassin's body and head turned into stone. Boom! It fell to the ground with a loud sound, rolled twice and turned into stone foam. When everyone saw this scene, they were so horrified that they were speechless. Everyone knows that Medusa has magical eyes, but what role the magical eyes have is not mentioned in Star Overlord. The official interstellar website of the game only has a simple background introduction to the game, such as the monsters and skills in it. And various things, what Callan Company said needs to be explored by players themselves. Even the existence of Medusa in the Lost Land was reminded by Emily. First update. If I didn't ask for votes, there wouldn't be any. Oh, you bunch of annoying little goblins, don't you know that I'm too straight to speak? I kept saying no, 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 I just want it to be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1266. You killed the assassin. The system prompt sound came, and Qing Ji breathed a sigh of relief. Because he was the Lord of TNC City, the system did not increase the crime value, nor did it prompt the Lord of TNC City that a wanted order was about to be issued against him. But as the assassin's body turned into stone and fell to the ground, Li Yuan, who had been invisible, suddenly burst into a cry, "Assassin! Don't panic, he should be out of the game." Qing Ji frowned and shouted, "The magic pupil's function is to turn to stone. You have to cover your eyes and you can't look into her eyes. The consequences of dying at the hands of NPCs in the game are different from those of dying at the hands of Qing Ji. Medusa's specialty attack is the enchanted pupil, which is a magic attack that can turn any living object she sees into the statue has lost its vitality. If the assassin dies from her bow and arrow, as long as his brain is not damaged and his mental power is not imprisoned, he will most likely be judged as physically dead by the system and forcibly teleported out of the game. At least he will still be alive when he re-enters the game. But if he died under Medusa's gaze, he would most likely die in real life after turning into a statue, ending up like Lily Tong in the original plot. Although Li Yuan and the assassin usually fight, they have a deep affection for each other. Now when he heard Qing Ji's words, Li Yuan responded. His trust in Qing Ji overcame the uneasiness in his heart. He would be injured. The extremely heavy Lu Qingzi was carried up. Medusa's temporary attention was attracted by Lily and Kinga. Lu Qingzi had now lost his fighting ability. In order to prevent him from being accidentally injured by Medusa later, Li Yuan took him away from the altar. After Lily discovered Medusa's offensive ability, she naturally put a blindfold on her eyes. It was definitely a bit uncomfortable at first. But once her eyes got used to the darkness, she gradually relied on her ears to hear directions. Medusa is extremely fast. In fact, sometimes the naked eye cannot capture her speed at all. Now she only relies on her ears. On the contrary, she could hear the sound of wind blowing from somewhere. While listening to the sound, Lily relied on her sixth sense to avoid several fatal attacks. But it is inevitable that there will still be scratches on the body. Those arrows carried accursed power, and ordinary healing medicine had no effect, so Lily ignored them. Once Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi left the altar, Lily had no scruples and arranged the entire altar into a sea of flames, except for leaving a little empty space. The surrounding temperature suddenly increased, and from time to time there was the sound of heavy objects tumbling on the fire, and the dense arrows shot faster. The woman's screams and screams sounded at the same time, but Lily couldn't see anything even though she covered her eyes. She could hear the sound of Qing Ji wielding his long sword. When the sword energy raged across the sky, it also cut off the capillaries on the surface of her body, causing waves of stinging pain. The screams in Medusa's mouth became more and more intensive, and her strong and powerful tail swept hard against the ground, making the altar shake with every stroke. The ground was cracked, gravel was flying everywhere, and some stones hit the body, which hurt as if shot. Lily endured the pain and set the fire even louder. Medusa's scream became even louder. Kinga shouted to her, "Get off the altar first." The smell of blood around him was very strong, and he didn't know if it was the smell of Medusa or Kinga. The altar was beaten to pieces, and from time to time there was a rumbling sound from the surroundings as stones rolled down the steps. When Lily heard Qing Ji's voice, she forced herself to stay calm and walked along the direction in her memory. She didn't dare to take off her blindfold. Would rather die under the arrows of Medusa. She must not die in her charming eyes. She tried to hide to the edge, and a fierce wind rushed towards her, as if the meat from the ground was thrown on a hot frying pan. The sizzling sound got closer and closer, and a cold hand grabbed her body. Something pulled the cloth around her eyes, and Lily instinctively wanted to open her eyes, but at this moment she used her strong willpower to hold back her instinctive movements. "Ha!" The woman's sharp scream sounded in her ears, as if she opened her mouth wide in front of her, and a fishy wind blew out of her mouth. The next moment, there was only a puff sound, and a long sword came from she passed it through her chest from behind. "Ah!" Medusa screamed loudly, and the snake's tail began to swing like a long whip. Her fight before death made the already shaky altar shake even more violently. Qing Ji he retracted the long sword, then stepped on the snake tail that Medusa had landed at his feet, bent down and pulled up the half-cooked snake tail, and smashed it to the ground hard. The beauty, whose upper body was a human and lower body was a snake, was suddenly lifted up by him and hit the ground heavily. The smell of burnt flesh was even stronger. Kinga threw the dying Medusa back. With a bang sound, the huge snake queen hit the goddess statue, and the shaking altar shook even more violently. Lily could barely stand on her feet, and her body leaned back instinctively. She opened her eyes, and she had just retreated to the edge of the altar. At this moment, the altar was shaking violently, and the sound of mud and rocks rolling down could be heard from all around. Lily had already stepped on the air, and the back half of her body was tilted down. Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi were on the other side. Seeing her shaky figure, they were unable to do anything. At the critical moment, her hand that was grabbing in mid-air was caught by a slightly cold hand. The man just used a slight force and pulled her away. She pulled him into his arms. Lily gasped. The altar was still shaking violently. Only then did Lily see clearly the Medusa hanging on the statue of the goddess on the altar. Her head hung weakly, and her head was covered with green snakes with their mouths open. She was staring at the two people here. The lower half of her dark green tail was now scarred, with large patches of scales. The armor had been dropped, and there was blood everywhere on the altar. Many places on Medusa were burned by fire, revealing bleeding wounds. Although the Snake Queen became famous because of her magical eyes, which caused her level to be raised to level 85 boss, but apart from the magical eyes, her only lethality is not that great. Certain powers seemed to be restrained, as if they were covered with a curse, and the strength she exerted was not consistent with her status as a level 85 boss, and was even inferior to Zhanwuji, the original lord of TNC City. Don't look. Kinga covered Lily's eyes. The power of the enchanted pupils was too strong. Now he thought of the scene when the assassin died. If this scene happened to Lily, just thinking about it made Kinga want to the thought of killing Medusa. Where is the seal to break the hidden race? Walking up to Medusa, her head full of snake hair was still looking at Ching-Ji ferociously with her mouth wide open. He raised his sword and cut off the little green snakes with their mouths wide open. When they landed on the ground, they turned into snakes and swam towards him. They just walked a few times in the flames all over the ground, and then they were gone. It turned into experience points and disappeared. It is conceivable that the cursed green snakes in the Lost Land should all come from the snake hair of Medusa. Hidden race? Haha. It's actually a hidden race. Medusa suddenly laughed, with a bit of sadness and loss in her voice. It turns out that she came here to hide her race. Her tail swung feebly on the ground, and she let out a hee-hee-hee laugh. Sometimes, the power to break the seal may not be what you want. She lowered her head and hung it high. There was a soft voice in the arms of the rising goddess statue. That's my question, Kinga responded calmly. What is the method to crack the hidden race? You don't regret it? The beautiful snake with her head lowered asked, but Ching-Ji didn't say anything. She seemed to smile bitterly. The secret to cracking the hidden race is. Before she could finish her words, a brilliant burst of light suddenly burst out in the sky. In the bright light, a woman with two huge wings of light spread out from behind suddenly appeared. In the name of the goddess, purify the sins in front of you. Ah! A beam of light shot out from the scepter in her hand and headed straight for Medusa. High Priest! When Lily saw Emily appearing, she exclaimed and instinctively wanted to push Medusa away. When Emily introduced several people to the Lost Land, she once talked about this place with hatred. This was the predecessor of the temple. After the temple was moved, Medusa occupied it. It is not difficult to imagine the original god. The changes in the temple probably have something to do with Medusa. At this time, Emily appeared and attacked Medusa, obviously wanting to kill and silence her. It's just that Medusa's body is too heavy and the beam comes so fast. It's impossible to move Medusa away from Emily's attack. Lily simply draws out the little spiritual power left in her body and shoots towards it. The goddess statue was hit at its feet. Her move didn't have much effect on Medusa before, but now it has a miraculous effect on a stone statue that has been there for many years and is gradually decaying. There was a loud click sound, and the tall goddess statue was hit at the foot. The stone had been exposed to wind and sun for many years. Now it was split open, there were a few sounds, and it staggered towards falling down. Medusa hung on the goddess statue, and slid down as the goddess statue fell. The magic that Emily hit passed over her waist, and she let out painful moans from her mouth. Weird and terrifying black smoke came out of her body. The screams from her mouth became more and more shrill. It was obviously not a fatal injury. But her screams were far more desolate than before when Ching-Ji's sword penetrated her body. Heresy! Emily's face became even colder when she saw the statue of the goddess was destroyed, and her eyes fell on Lily. Now, new hatred came to her. She still remembers the scene when Lily threatened her, and also remembers that Lily once laughed at her. These people couldn't kill them before, but now they want to ruin her good deeds again. Emily raised the scepter in her hand. You guys go to hell. Second update. People always say that the economy is in recession these days. I didn't believe it before, but now I realize that the world is very difficult. Beauties and handsome guys, please spend some of your tickets. Please have mercy on me. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I even knelt down. To be continued. Carrot. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1267. Your opponent is me, Kinga sneered. Emily was still reciting the spell. Just because she was eager to kill Medusa, she was not far away from Kinga. Now the warrior's talent in restraining the mage characters began to show. Before Emily finished chanting the spell in her mouth, Kinga had already rubbed the exile blade in his hand, and the long sword rotated in his palm several times, with thunderous momentum. Fly towards Emily. The first time she was injured in Qing Ji's hands, causing her success to fail. Now it happened again, and she was pierced through the chest with the sword again. Ah! Emily groaned in pain, with anger and hatred in her voice. She fell from the air like a big bird shot through by a bow and arrow. Bang! It fell to the ground with a loud sound. Before she finished reciting the spell in her mouth, the light gathered at the top of the scepter in her hand quickly began to scatter. Well, Emily was seriously injured, but strangely, no blood flowed out of her body. Instead, her wounds continued to disappear as if they were turning into dust. Her wounds were getting bigger and bigger. From where Lily stood, she could see the ground behind her through the hole in her chest. It's strange to say that Emily should have lost all her mana due to the forbidden spell last time. Now she not only reappeared to recover from her injuries, but her mana seemed to have been restored before. Lily frowned. Millie's pale and pretty face still showed unwillingness and resentment. Because you failed the forbidden spell, all your magic power should have been sacrificed. Lily glanced at Emily, and she sneered twice. How do you weirdos understand the greatness of God, while speaking? Her face turned paler, and the wound expanded more and more. Lily could almost see her body turning into golden dust and falling in the air. She was a little unwilling, but with a bit of anger and helplessness. This is the price of sacrifice with life. A faint voice sounded, and Lily resisted herself from turning back to look into Medusa's eyes. Her eyes fell on her tail hanging on the ground. What happened here? This is a task given by the system that must be completed. If it cannot be completed, no one can leave. As soon as she said this, Emily seemed to have heard the most shameful words in the world. A complicated look flashed in her eyes. She almost wanted to stand up impulsively, and wanted to talk to him. Lily fights for hundreds more rounds. What happened? Medusa asked quietly, and after a while she smiled bitterly. Don't you want to hide the secret of your race? You evil, filthy, disgusting pervert. As soon as Medusa opened her mouth, Emily, who was already breathless, started to curse. Her expression was fierce, and her face that had seemed pretty at first looked ferocious and terrifying. Why don't you die? You blasphemous damned one. She seemed to have an extraordinary resentment towards Medusa. Lily heard this. Instinctively, I felt something was wrong. Emily's expression at this time was exactly the same as when Lily and others broke into the apse of the temple and asked her about her hidden race. The task proposed by the system is to ask Lily and others to find out the secret of the Lost Land. Medusa has been guarding the Lost Land, carrying the power of the curse. At this moment, Emily's curse on Medusa is indeed true. Confirmed this. Medusa is trapped in the Lost Land and cursed. As the high priest of the temple, Emily hates her. Medusa's special ability is to turn living creatures that look at her into shape. As a lifeless statue, Emily happened to be unable to see the light. All kinds of seemingly coincidental clues pile up at this time. Lily's eyes lit up. Qing Ji, who was on the side, obviously understood the connection. He was the first to speak. You are also one of the hidden races. He pointed at Medusa with the tip of his sword and spoke. This was not a question, but an affirmation. In fact, everyone had already thought of such a conjecture before coming. But this time it was confirmed by Emily's attitude. Emily was still sneering after hearing Kinga's words. Before Medusa could speak, she curled her lips. Of course she is dirty, despised by God, a monster with snake hair and body after being cursed. You will be like her. No, it should exist in this world. You hate her. Lily spoke coldly, and Emily, who was originally excited, was stunned for a moment, and then snorted coldly, "Of course I hate her. I can't wait to kill her. I am the chief priest of the temple, and the biggest task in my life is to eradicate heretics, get rid of these monsters." Every time she said a word, Medusa's body lying on the ground curled up, as if it had been poked in a painful spot. The thick and scarred snake tail was now struggling to move as much as possible and coiled up, protecting the upper half of her body. Everyone looked at her more as if she had buried her body in the snake's tail, as if she was ashamed to see others. "What's wrong? You monster! You don't dare to look me in the eyes anymore? You're still standing next to the statue of the Mother Goddess. You've turned your back on God. You've fallen into the netherworld, you evil thing." Emily cursed viciously, but Medusa remained silent. This situation is really weird. This level 85 boss looks like an abused woman hiding in a corner and licking her wounds. "Emily, do you hate her really because Medusa is the forsaken god?" Lily looked at Emily, who had mostly disappeared. Her eyes were not focused at all, and half of her body was at this time already turned into dust. She should really disappear this time. She paid for the sacrifice with her life, and whether she succeeded or failed, she would eventually lose her life. If Emily is a loyal believer, there is nothing wrong with her sacrificing her life and soul. Every NPC in the game has its own intelligence, thoughts, and behaviors, just like a living person. It's not surprising that someone who is a high priest in a temple has his own beliefs and is crazy about them. In the real world, there are also many people like Emily who serve the gods and regard themselves as servants of gods. She regarded Medusa as a heretic, and it was not unusual for her to want to get rid of her. She kept shouting that Medusa was an alien and looked down upon her between lines, but the problem was that her attitude towards Medusa seemed to be more resentful than disdainful. That kind of resentment was not like a person who is born to hate evil and hates people with different beliefs. The resentment of the two seems to be like a blood feud between the two. Lily frowned, her gaze fixed on Emily's face where only half of her body was left. She was filled with unwillingness and despair at the moment, as if she was dissatisfied that she had sacrificed her body without getting anything in return. "Have you ever had any personal enmity between you?" Lily asked, and Emily sneered, "There will always be incompatibility between me and her, just like light and darkness can never coexist. The meaning of my existence is to kill her. She is a shame to the temple, a heretic who betrayed the Mother Goddess and was cursed by the Mother Goddess. The meaning of your existence is to kill her. Medusa has magic eyes. She is the natural enemy of all creatures with vision. If you want to kill her, you must be blind." When Lily said this, Amy Lee's expression suddenly became furious. She seemed to have been stabbed in a painful spot again, and she began to curse with gritted teeth. When Lily saw her attitude, her heart moved. Recalling the battle in the temple, Kinga mentioned that Emily was blind, and she was extremely angry about it. The word blind should be her weakness, but if Emily has been like this all her life, then she has lived to this age and has become the chief priest of the temple. It is impossible for her to still be resentful about this. You were not born blind, Emily. The reason why you hate Medusa and the hidden race so much is probably not because Medusa is a heretic or abandoned by God, but because you were chosen by God. The woman who wants to eliminate Medusa, and the power of Medusa's awakened hidden race is the enchanted pupil, so that you can kill Medusa, so your eyes are blinded. Only in this way can Emily's strange resentment towards Medusa and her concern for her eyes be explained. As soon as Lily said these words, Emily's whole body seemed like a bomb that had been detonated. She gritted her teeth and screamed, "Nonsense! I resent her because she is a heretic, and my duty is to destroy her." The louder she complained and explained, the more she looked fierce and angry. The panic and urgency on her face could not be concealed, and there was a sense of uneasiness after a long-hidden secret was revealed. Lily was indeed talking nonsense after her own guesses. Badeo, but seeing Emily's look at this moment, what else doesn't she understand? She is a cursed monster. She dares not interact with humans all her life. She only dares to hide in this remote corner and dare not look at people. She has no friends and can only live alone until the end of the world. Emily said loudly. He said, I don't know if he said this to others, or if he wanted to convince himself, I am different from her. What is there about her that deserves my jealousy? You are all the same, Lily interrupted her, and Emily looked frantic and shouted, Stop! You're talking nonsense. You're talking nonsense. Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, you know it yourself. Medusa was rejected by God and cursed. Her eyes can never look directly at others. And you, even if your eyes can look directly at others, you can never see them. Anything. In fact, both of you are cursed by God. You want to kill Medusa just because you may have lost your light because of her. You don't have the guts to retaliate against God. You only dare to use it as an object of resentment. Picture. Lily pointed out one word at a time, and Emily yelled like crazy, Nonsense, nonsense. Just came out of the dark room. First update. To celebrate the update, everyone come and vote to celebrate. It's even more fun to have two together. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1268. Is this true? Emily. Medusa, who had been wrapping her body in the snake's tail and hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly spoke quietly. She raised her head and looked at Emily. If an ordinary person was looked at by her like this, his eyes would be with hers. By the time of handover, I'm afraid it would have already turned into stone sculpture. But because Emily lost her light, she was not affected at all. Nonsense, she's talking nonsense, she's talking nonsense. Emily repeated these two sentences back and forth in her mouth, making two soft tick-tock sounds, and 2 drops of water rolled from the eyes of Medusa, who lowered her head. It fell down and turned into 2 beads that kept rolling when it hit the ground. 1, 2, 3. Lily guessed that the plot mission had probably begun. She silently knelt down and picked up Medusa's tears rolling on the ground. This thing was dropped from Medusa. Medusa is a level 85 boss and the only boss. Once it disappears, it will never be seen again. She doesn't believe that this thing is useless. She picked it up to be prepared. What might happen in the future? This is what is needed. If you miss this village, there won't be this store. Even if the beads are useless, you can just sell them to the grocer in the city. It doesn't take much effort. Ding. You have obtained the water of sincerity. The system prompt sounded in Lily's ears, and Lily was shocked. At first, she picked this thing up purely because she wanted to pick something up to be prepared, but she didn't expect that this was the water of sincerity. What is the water of sincerity? The original owner's memory in the plot does not know, but among the materials needed for the Emperor pill that Lily obtained before, the water of sincerity is one of them. Lily suppressed the joy in her heart and saw that Medusa was still crying in front of her while she reached out to pick up all the water of sincerity on the ground. She calmly took out the formula of Emperor pill from her bag. As expected, in the formula, in addition to the location of the imperial gold sand, even the location of the required water of sincerity also lit up. It turns out that we are all cursed, right? Medusa cried for a while and spoke tremblingly. These slightly sad words fell into Ching Ji's ears. Keeping the plot in mind, his eyes fell on Lily, who was squatting on the ground and picking up things. He found that Lily's eyes were shining, as if she had made a fortune, and the corners of her mouth were slightly curled. When Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi saw this scene, their brows jumped. Who is like you? Emily immediately retorted. When Lily heard the words that Medusa was once a human being, she stuffed all the water of sincerity she picked up into the package. Once the plot begins, Medusa stops crying. Since she said she was once a human, Her current appearance was the reason why Emily said she was cursed. She was in the lost temple, accompanied by the statue of the goddess, guarding the altar. The Lost Land was originally the predecessor of the temple, and Emily hated her to the core. No need to ask Lily at this time to know that the Lost Land may have become like this, which is inseparable from Medusa's hidden race and the reason for the curse. Once she knows why she was cursed and how she is related to the hidden race, basically Lily will know the method of breaking the seal of the hidden race, and the task of why the Lost Land was formed may also be lifted at the same time. Lily stood up. Emily's body had almost disappeared now, leaving only one head. "I'm different from you." "Different?" she hissed. Although her face flickered in the air, "I am a loyal believer of the goddess." As she spoke, 2 lines of tears rolled out of her eyes. Her words were filled with unspeakable desolation, and she had not finished shouting. Her unwilling voice was still floating in the air, but her whole body gradually turned into dust. All of a sudden, they were scattered on the altar. Emily's somewhat resentful voice still seemed to be ringing in everyone's ears. The sound was indescribable to people's ears. "Yes, we are all loyal believers of the goddess," Medusa repeated. Emily kept saying that she was a person abandoned by the gods and was cursed by the mother goddess, but now she said that she is a believer in God, and when the words came out of her mouth, she felt a little sad. Lily was about to speak, but Medusa lowered her head. "Do you want to decipher the secret of the hidden race?" Yes. Kinga put the tip of the sword on the ground, and the sharp tip of the sword was inserted into the ground for a few inches. Medusa suddenly laughed softly. "You know why the previous temple was located in and build the statue of the mother goddess here." When she said this, Lily cheered up. This should be the reason why she wanted to tell the origin and formation of the Lost Land. As long as she said this, everyone's task would be completed. Lily's lips moved, but before she could speak, Kinga went straight to the point. "I don't want to know this, I just want to know the secret of the hidden race and the reason why the Lost Land was formed." He didn't give Medusa a chance to greet her. "Lily." Haha. Medusa laughed twice. Even though she couldn't see her face at this moment, Lily could already feel the veins on Medusa's forehead beating wildly. Kinga didn't follow the plot at all, and obviously disrupted some of Medusa's settings. She ignored Kinga's words at all. Because the temple was chosen here, below the temple, to suppress the netherworld. At this point, Medusa paused. "The reason why the statue of the mother goddess was built here is actually to suppress the Ghost King." After Medusa said this, except for Lu Qingzi, who was seriously injured and dying and could not speak, no one from Lily, Qingji, or Li Yuan answered the question. Obviously, everyone did not want to know why the temple appeared here. As for the reason for the statue of the goddess, no one is even remotely interested in suppressing the Ghost King. Lily has been alive for a long time, and her curiosity is not as strong as that of a real little girl. Kinga thinks that it is none of his business that the gods and ghosts are not in harmony. He doesn't want to know about these things set by Karen Company. In the plot, some idiot came up with the main storyline. Li Yuan was absent-minded. The assassin died before, and he didn't know if he was ejected from the game. He didn't hide his race, so he didn't have much curiosity about these old things in the system. As soon as Medusa finished speaking, she did not enjoy the expected enthusiastic questions. Her tail immediately trembled, she slapped the ground twice, and then she forced herself to speak. "The statue of the mother goddess has been here for hundreds of years. In fact, if the person who set up this dungeon according to Karen Company has a normal thought, there is actually no hidden race, but a mutant race." After Medusa said these words, her temperament dictated that she should tell Amy Litong died, and before she died, she told the players why the temple was chosen here, and consumed her last bit of life force to transport the players into the netherworld. From then on, the netherworld dungeon was officially opened in the game. Players who conquer the dungeon for the first time will receive the first boss reward after defeating Medusa and enter the dungeon. From the dungeon, they can learn the lifelong reason why Medusa was cursed. Once understood, as the first person to clear the dungeon, you will be rewarded with Medusa's mutation, which means you have the ability to mutate, which is called the rebirth system in the game. However, because a hidden race accidentally appeared in the game, Medusa's mutant race suddenly changed from the system's automatic correction error to a hidden race. This dungeon was supposed to be officially opened after the player reached level 90. Even before Lily Tong died in the plot, because no one had cracked the dungeon of the Lost Land, the rebirth system did not appear at all. Lily's life of Medusa Tong Bei didn't know it from her memory, but she didn't expect that she would bump into him by mistake. Kinga remained silent and didn't speak, but his hand holding the sword hilt tightened. His eyes looked indifferent, but he obviously couldn't stand Medusa's nonsense. When Lily heard Medusa say that the altar leads directly to the netherworld and that the statue of the goddess exists to suppress the Ghost King, Lily suddenly felt something in her heart. She remembered the beautiful NPC she had met when she entered the game. The receptionist, she once issued a mission to herself, which was to find the flower of the other shore in the netherworld. In fact, Tong Bei never saw what the flower of the other side looked like until her death in the plot. Lily only remembered the back of the Nether Lord of the Ghost Tribe when he held the flower of the other side from the promotional pictures released by Karen Company. In fact, she had vaguely forgotten about this mission. If Medusa hadn't mentioned the Netherworld dungeon today, she might not have been able to remember it. When Medusa mentioned it, Lily also remembered the mission at the same time, and her eyes suddenly lit up. So what do you need us to do? Don't you want to know the secret of the hidden race? It's there. After she finished speaking, she raised her head and turned to look at the statue of the goddess that had been damaged by Qing Ji. I am a person who should not exist in this world. The aliens in this world are the unknown people who have been cursed. I hope you will not end up with the same fate as me. The next moment, her tail hit the ground heavily, and the already damaged altar suddenly shook desperately. When he got up, the surrounding gravel fell down with a click, and a huge gap suddenly opened in the middle of the altar, and a ravine with no end as far as the eye could see slowly appeared in front of several people. Li Yuan could barely stand on his own feet. Kinga held Lily in his arms. Medusa laughed loudly. Mother Goddess, even if you curse me and despise me, I will still return to your arms. To explain, some people say that Lily has the aura of a royal true dragon, and the snake will be afraid of her and will not attack her. Afterwards, it was discovered that it attacked her, and it felt that this skill was useless. I just want to say that the real snakes in the mission world will not attack Lily, but it does not mean that the snakes in the game system will not attack. Just like rabbits in the real world don't kill people, but rabbits in the game might kill people. Also please vote. To be continued. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1269. After saying that, Medusa got the strength from nowhere, jumped up dragging her scarred body, and suddenly hit the statue of the goddess heavily with her head. There was a loud bang, and the statue of the goddess was knocked to the side. The sound of falling gravel became more urgent. Medusa's body fell weakly on the statue of the goddess. The altar shook even more violently. Lily and others people are barely standing, but now Medusa collides with them. How can they still stand firm? Li Yuan held the seriously injured Lu Qingzi, and the two of them screamed miserably and fell into the bottomless abyss. Lily also rolled down in Qing Ji's arms, and the sound of wind in her ears was vaguely accompanied by Li Yuan's curse. I'm sorry for you, I'm going to drag a few people around after I die. This is definitely revenge. I don't know how long she had fallen. When Lily's arms holding Kinga felt numb, the two of them rolled to the ground with a bang. Fortunately, Kinga adjusted his body shape when he fell, and was cushioned under Lily. Now with Qing Ji as a cushion, she almost vomited blood after falling, but she was still dizzy. After swallowing a few healing pills, she felt much better. The surroundings were quiet. Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi didn't know whether they were dead or alive, and there was no sound at all. Lily reached out and pushed Qing Ji, who was unable to move on the ground. Qing Ji, are you still alive? Her voice was the only thing that could be heard from all around. Perhaps this place seemed spooky because it belonged to the ghost clan. Even her normal words sounded a bit spooky and full of resentment. Qing Ji didn't respond, and Lily became a little anxious. There was no outside news available here. She didn't know if the person who died inside was actually in the pop-up game. She stretched out her hand to touch Qing Ji's nose. She didn't know if it was because of the cold wind blowing for a long time when she just fell. Qing Ji's body was cold. If he died in the game but was still alive in reality, his body should have left the game. Lily touched his chest again. He was wearing thick warrior armor and could not feel his heartbeat. She couldn't help but reach out to take off his armor, and reached in from his chest. As soon as she touched his warm skin, Lily didn't have time to rejoice that his chest was warm. The next moment, the hand that was originally holding her waist tightened. She immediately couldn't help but throw herself on Qing Ji in the same posture as before. Her lips brushed against his face. The next moment, he removed his hands from Lily's waist, covered her face, put his cold lips on hers, and eagerly thrust his tongue in, absorbing her breath and screams. He held her face firmly with his hands, and the tip of his tongue swept every part of Lily's lips almost eagerly, and each tooth was gently licked by him. It brought about waves of trembling and madness. The soft tongue sucked Lily, and his kiss was just like his character, strong and domineering. Lily could hardly breathe, and felt a little ashamed and annoyed. After falling from such a high place, no matter how thick-skinned and thick-bodied he was, there's no way there's nothing wrong with it. They don't know where they are now, and the assassin and Lu Qingzi don't know whether they are alive or not, so he just wants to take advantage of them. Still so stupid, Kinga felt her struggling desperately. Can't breathe anymore. Then let her go. It was obviously his first kiss, but as soon as he touched her lips, it was as if his thoughts had their own consciousness, without him having to think about what to do. He seemed to have done this kind of thing many times. As soon as he said this, not only Qing Ji paused, but also Lily was stunned for a moment. She gasped desperately and turned to stare in the direction where he had just spoken. Cough, 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 cough. Kinga coughed twice, and Lily tried her best to move her body away from pressing him. Where are you injured? He let go of Lily's hand and reached out to touch his body. The ribs are broken. In fact, when he fell, he had already taken a few healing pills in his mouth as a precaution, and swallowed them the moment he landed. Otherwise, it would not be just like this, and he might be dead. The surroundings were eerie and very dark. Lily took out 2 top-quality healing pills from her bag and stuffed them into Kinga's mouth. He swallowed them, and gently bit Lily's fingers with his teeth, and licked them with his tongue. Lily turned to glare at him again, but neither party's faces could be seen clearly in the darkness. Her eyes were not threatening at all. On the contrary, after Kinga took the healing medicine, he grabbed her hand and pulled her into his arms. Another heavy kiss. You too. Li Yuan's desperate voice came from the darkness. Stop showing off your affection. Lily had only thought that something had happened to Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi before. She didn't hear their voices when they just fell. Now she heard Li Yuan speak. Judging from the direction of the sound, it was probably when Li Yuan and Lu Qingzi were meeting. About 10 meters away, she stood up and fumbled to remember the past, but Qing Ji held her tightly, unable to move at all. Lily could only ask, Li Yuan, can you move? Probably, but Qingzi, Kinga, Qingzi should have died in the game. Zixi Suoshuo's voice came from over there. He must have swallowed healing medicine, and when he spoke later, he no longer looked as weak as before. Kinga, we entered the game and died in the Lost Land. Are we ejected from the game? He should be worried about the safety of the assassin and Lu Qingzi. Kinga was silent for a while. The speed is out of the dungeon. You will know when you get out. There is no way to communicate with the outside world in the dungeon. Except for the 3 people in the dungeon, the private chats of everyone on the communicator cannot be dialed out, and even if you want to exit the game, you can't. Qing Ji would not say hypocritical words to appease Li Yuan just because he was worried, but now that he said his words, he gave Li Yuan a lot of confidence. Even though there were only 3 people left in the team out of 5 in total, but facing this unknown copy, he was still strong and confident. This is the territory of the Ghost Tribe, and Li Yuan's attributes are very consistent with this place, so he quickly became alive and kicking after taking the healing potion. Lily herself also swallowed a healing potion and felt much better. She is still getting used to it. After getting the light, she felt a little unaccustomed to being in the dark. Lily took out the equipment she usually used to barbecue, but maybe it was because of the weirdness of this place, but the fire she took out couldn't light at all. Fortunately, Li Yuan himself is a ghost tribe, and his adaptability to darkness is much higher than Qing Ji. In fact, Lily also seemed to have gained a boost after vaguely feeling this place. It seems to be related to the power of the netherworld. There was no light in this place, and we didn't know which direction it was in. Everyone could only walk one step at a time and look at each step. After walking for a few minutes, the surroundings were quiet, and the only sounds that could be heard were the breathing and footsteps of a few people. After taking 2 steps, Lily suddenly felt as if her toes were hooked on something, and she staggered and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Qing Ji had quick eyesight and quick hands. The moment he felt something was wrong, he stretched out his hand to support her. "Be careful," he reminded her loudly. Lily nodded and was about to speak. The next moment she felt the hand that was originally resting on her footsteps. The thing actually came to life, and a hand that looked like a dead branch grabbed her ankle with a click. A huge force came, pulling her down, as if something began to crawl up her calf. Lily's spiritual power surged, a bolt of lightning appeared out of thin air, and a boom sound filled the surrounding dark space. It was illuminated, and a half-skeleton hugged Lily's leg, and a skeletal hand was raised, aiming at the position of her heart. When the lightning struck down, it hit the skeleton all at once. With a crash sound, the skeleton's body was shaken by the lightning and fell to the ground. Lily summoned 2 more thunderbolts. With the assistance of Li Yuan and Qing Ji, the skeletons were scattered on the ground. The system prompted. "Congratulations on killing the bone skull and gaining 436 experience points." With the lightning summoned by Lily just now, several people could roughly see the situation underground clearly. There were many white bones scattered around. At this time, they should feel the breath of strangers, and they all stood up with a click. There was no movement at first, but then more and more happened. At this time, the benefits of Lily's group attack were shown. After more than 10 minutes of fighting, the experience points of several people slowly increased. Among the 3 of them, there was no assassin who could draw the diary map, so Lily suggested that everyone walk in the same direction. After walking for 7 or 8 days, although the surroundings were still dark, the monsters around them changed. The bones and skeletons at the beginning have become zombies. Although the risk factor is much higher, the experience value is also much higher. After staying underground for more than a month, several people have gradually become accustomed to the bright light around them. They have killed countless skeletons and zombies in the past few days. After Lily reached level 61, her experience points have jumped forward a little. Everyone's physical strength, when it was not enough, he would stop and rest for a while, and when he was sleepy, he would take turns to stay overnight. After walking for another half a month, although there was still no light around, Lily could hear the faint sound of the river flowing not far away. "Did you hear the sound of water? Everyone has been underground for so long. To be honest, the darkness and depression here have put a lot of psychological pressure on people. If it weren't for the psychological quality of several people, I'm afraid they would have been unable to hold back by now. Every day, except for the system prompts when killing monsters and the voices of several people talking, there is no other sound in my ears. When Lily spoke, Kinga responded. Go and see. Several people walked in the direction of the source of the sound. The closer they got, the louder the sound of running water became. I don't know if it was everyone's illusion, but they seemed to be able to see a faint orange light in front of them. A large number of zombies roared and surrounded them. A few people worked together to deal with these monsters. They rushed towards the light and saw an unusually wide river not far away. On the opposite side was a large sea of red flowers in full bloom, so charming. It's almost weird. The red light Lily and others saw before was emanating from the sea of flowers. Please vote. Everyone, look at my upright face, I mean it. I really want a monthly vote, please vote for me. It would be better to cast both of them together. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Canon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1270. Higanbana. Lily's eyes couldn't help but light up when she saw this. This is the first time the three of them have seen light since they entered the Nether Realm. At this time, Li Yuan was also a little relieved. Although everyone is not afraid of the dark, it is human nature to always yearn for light. After staying in this place for a long time, it will always be. It was depressing. When Lily opened her mouth, Kinga glanced at her. She could tell what Kinga's look meant, so she explained to him. I have a mission, which is to pick the flowers of the other side. After she finished speaking, she wanted to share the mission she had received with Qingji and Li Yuan. But she didn't know if it was because she had received the mission before entering the game. Lily wanted to share it. When tasking, the system prompts, the task cannot be shared. There is no way to share. After she finished speaking, she explained how she had become a hidden race and received the task of leading the NPC. The fact that she was a hidden race was not a secret in the team, and Li Yuan had already while Lily was talking, someone suddenly started to rock the boat on the river, and someone inside shouted, the dead can cross, but the living cannot get in. Ghosts can leave, but humans can't enter. Hey, boatman. Li Yuan suddenly stretched out his hand to say hello, and the boat staggered towards the side. The driver was an old man with a stiff face. The dead can get on, but the living can't. Ghosts can leave, but humans can't enter. There is no bridge or other means of transportation on the river. No matter how to clear this Netherland dungeon, Lily saw the flower on the other side and had to cross the river. To board the ship, you have to pay a toll, the old man said with a cold face. You are not from the land of the Netherworld, except for him, and he pointed at Li Yuan and glanced at Lily again, with a bit of confusion in his eyes. You two are people from the land of the Netherworld. You can pay less. But I don't like the smell on his body, so I have to pay double. It's fair to pay for the boat ride, Lily nodded. Taking out 10,000 gold coins from his bag, the old man shook his head. She drew another 100,000, and finally drew 1,000,000, but the old man still shook his head. This proves that to cross this river, ordinary game gold coins will not work. She took out food, drinks, and various things dropped by fighting monsters, and even tried to hand out the scepter in her hand. The old man still shook his head. Are you looking for trouble? Li Yuan couldn't help but speak angrily. The old man just shook his head. Qingji's palms loosened and tightened, and loosened again, and finally couldn't hold it back anymore, and raised the sword in his hand. Send us across the river, or I will kill you, and seize the boat to cross. As soon as he said these words, Li Yuan secretly screamed. As expected. After hearing Kinga's words, the eccentric old man hit the three of them with the wooden paddle in his hand. The wooden paddle in his hand suddenly turned into a black wand, and a black flame rushed towards the three of them as he raised the wand. Kinga pulled Lily and retreated quickly. Li Yuan entered the state of ghost transformation and avoided the blow. The next moment, the long sword in Kinga's hand slashed at the old man. The huge lethality brought by the sword energy even split the ground into cracks, and the old man narrowly avoided it. During several rounds of the two sides, although the old man was not weak, Li Yuan's moves were unpredictable, and Lily set fire to him. Not to mention that Kinga's attack power is extremely high. The three of them cooperated well and had a tacit understanding. The old man who had been eccentric just now quickly surrendered. Okay, no more fighting. Don't delay my business. The wand in his hand quickly turned back into a paddle. He yelled for mercy. I will take you there, but the things you just promised me cannot be less. Haching Ge sneered and raised his hand again. When the old man saw this scene, he quickly said, if you don't want anything, you should give me money, right? How much do you want? Lily asked, and he pointed out a finger, 1 million. Too much. Just now Lily was willing to pay 1 million, but now that the old man wants to reconcile, she naturally doesn't want to be the one who took advantage of him. The two parties were bargaining back and forth, and one of them thought that 1 million was too much. One of them refused to give in, and while the discussion was in full swing, Ching Ji's cold voice came, get on the boat. Lily and the old man, who were still discussing the price, turned to look. Kinga and Li Yuan had jumped onto the boat at some point. At this time, the boat was several steps away from the river. When Ching Ji asked Lily to get on the boat, he struck at the old man with his sword. The old man instinctively ducked sideways. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lily jumped on the boat. Ching Ji's sword struck the river, and in an instant, the kung fu boat had already swung out a few meters away. Come back, the old man jumped anxiously, you are robbing me, give me back my boat. Want to get on the boat? You have to pay. Ching Ji on the boat shook his head, and the old man was about to cry without tears, 10,000. Les Kinga just shook his head. 100,000. Million. The previous scene was completely reversed now. During the bargaining, the deal was finally settled for 1 million. The boat came close again. The old man jumped on the boat and shouted sullenly, big loss, big loss. The closer they got to the opposite side, the closer the Bianhua came to the group of people. The old man sent the three of them to the other side of the river. Behi and the others got off the boat, and the old man shook the boat angrily and ran away. Lily and the others couldn't care about him at this time. There were flowers everywhere here. When Lily remembered her mission and reached out to pick the flowers, a male voice suddenly rang. The flower of the other shore blooms for 1,000 years and falls for 1,000 years. The flowers and leaves will never see each other. Love is not cause and effect, fate is destined to life and death. As he spoke, a figure suddenly appeared among the flowers, with his back to everyone, holding a hand holding a flower from the other side. This scene and figure are clearly the same as the back of the Lord of the Netherworld in Interstellar Overlord created by Karen Company. But Lily felt strangely that this voice was familiar. As the figure appeared, these large bright red flowers began to emit bursts of refreshing fragrance. This hazy fragrance must have the effect of making people hallucinate, because it left the UN very quickly. Then he was vulnerable and fell into a coma among the flowers. He didn't know what he was dreaming about, and his face looked sad and happy at times. Although Lily felt that she was awake, she found that she seemed to have fallen asleep, and her body and mind were not under her control. She saw the various worlds in which she entered the mission, and suddenly saw in the beginning, when she died in a car accident, she even vaguely saw a strange scene. She saw Li Yangzi, but it was different from the Li Yangzi she had seen before. Seems more vivid. He looked at her coldly, as if looking at a stranger. She saw Li Yangzi towering above her, as if she could always be out of reach. She had never felt that way since the two became partners, but now the feeling was extremely clear. Lily even had the feeling that it seems that they didn't meet Li Yangzi only because she survived to do tasks after her death, but as if they had known each other earlier. Unfortunately, when she was about to look down again, she suddenly woke up. Lily was shocked. What kind of magic power did this Bianhua flower have? It could actually make her see these unreasonable things. If it were just scenes from the previous world, many scenes that existed in her memory and that she seemed to have forgotten long ago were replayed one by one, reminding her of the many things she had experienced. But forget about things that have happened. Why can things that haven't happened be seen under the influence of Bana flower? What the hell are you talking about? The picture of Li Yangzi he just saw was so exciting. He seemed to be a stranger to him. Ever since he got close to him, he had never looked at him like that. Now that she was being fooled by an NPC in the game, Lily was furious, feeling unsettled and feeling as if Li Yangzi would leave her, making Lily look ugly. Obviously that person was right next to her, and the two were so close. She reached out and grabbed Qing Ji's hand. Qing Ji must have been affected, too. Even in his sleep, he held her back. What kind of trick did you do? Lily felt unhappy at the moment. It had been a long time since she was in such a bad mood as now. The last scene she saw under the influence of the fragrance of flowers was the loneliness and helplessness when Li Yangzi left her. Help. This feeling just confirmed her situation at this time. She was left alone in the starry sky. She didn't know when Li Yangzi would return. She even had a hidden worry in her heart, wondering if he could come back. At this moment, the fragrance of flowers made her look. The scene hit her at her weakest point, which made her particularly angry. She is not an impulsive person, and she likes to be confident before taking on tasks. But at this moment, Lily could hardly control her temper, and even raised the scepter in her hand. The flower of the other shore is planted where ghosts must pass by. It is also known as the flower that attracts the deceased. It can recall the past and present lives of the deceased. It's not something I did. What you see is just what happened to you. Nonsense. Lily's eyes were cold as she looked at the Lord of the Netherworld. Even though she knew that this NPC was not that easy to deal with, dragons have reverse scales and people have weaknesses. The influence of the flower of the other side on her was too bad. At this moment, murderous intent had already arisen in her heart. The heaven and earth are infinite, the universe is in order. Lily also recited the Tao Te Ching in the game. As she opened her mouth, a large amount of spiritual power gathered around her, and the netherworld among the flowers turned its back to her. The Lord suddenly raised his hand. You don't want to know about Medusa's life. Lily sneered, if I kill you, there will always be a way to find out. You don't want to know the reason why the Lost Land was formed. The Lord of the Netherworld asked again, and Lily couldn't bear it anymore and threw the scepter in her hand at him. Why are there so many nonsense? Asking for a monthly ticket. To be continued. Cannon Fodder Strategy. Author, Juan ERWR. Chapter 1271. Ouch, the NPC, who was so awesome when he first appeared, suddenly made a painful sound from his mouth, and then the system prompted. You have hurt the Lord of the Netherworld. The player queen's crime value is add 10. The law of the Netherworld Ghost City warns you that if the crime value reaches 10, you will face prison. This is obviously a dungeon, and a normal NPC shouldn't appear. The person who appears now should be an NPC. How come the guilt value of just hitting someone is add 10? Lily suddenly felt even more depressed. Anyway, everyone has been beaten, so it is better to kill this Lord of the Netherworld. Anyway, after clearing the dungeon of Netherworld Polar region, everyone will disperse and go home, each going back to each house to find their mother. No matter how high her sin value is, it will not affect the Ghost Clan's territory. Just don't come here for now, let's see what these ghosts can do to her. Don't fight, the voice shouted suddenly and loudly. Lily's eyebrows jumped and she hit her with all kinds of tricks. The guilt value in her ears kept increasing. The NPC didn't die but didn't turn around. She vented her anger. At this moment, she felt much calmer. Seeing that the NPC didn't look afraid of death, she walked around to take a look at him. At this sight, Lily's mouth opened wide. Luzioki. This person was clearly the Luzioki who she met in the dark forest before entering the huge red ant nest and meeting Ching-Ji and others. He begged her for meat and provided her with the secret of the hidden race. But how could this person be the mysterious lord of the netherworld in the Karen Company game advertisement? Lily's whole body felt bad. Luzioki on the other end shook his head desperately. I'm not Luzioki. He denied it with a serious look on his face, and Lily stared at him for a long time, looking at the strange reddish light of Bianhuawa. He was stared at by Lily so much that cold sweat broke out on his forehead, but he still managed to stay calm and did not turn around and run away like before. Who are you coaxing? Lily sneered, seeing his forehead quickly covered with sweat beads. With a nervous and forbearing look, who did you fool? You are Luzioki. Even if you change your clothes and think that you are no longer Luzioki. I'm really not Luzioki, he denied with a serious face. Lily was too lazy to tell him more. She raised the scepter in her hand and reached out to hit him. Anyway, once she hit the NPC, she would be reminded who she had hurt. This move was learned from when Kinga beat Emily and asked her about her identity as the High Priest. The Lord of the Netherworld quickly realized Lily's intention, and he quickly surrendered. Okay, I am Luzioki. He looked a little downcast. He reluctantly admitted his identity. Lily was really speechless. This timid Luzioki, who fainted when he was easily frightened, now turned into the Lord of the Netherworld. This was too dramatic. Why are you here? Lily asked. As soon as she said this, the NPC in front of her was like a lost lamb that had found its mother's arms. He spoke with runny nose and tears. You think I want to be here? It's so dark here. There are ghosts here. Do you see over there? He rolled his eyes back. The boatman in the back sends ghosts there every day. People who come and pass by here every time. It's terrible. Lily suddenly couldn't say a word. The previous murderous intention receded like a tide. Looking at the man in front of her who was crying with snot and tears, the corners of her mouth twitched. Please take me away quickly. I can't bear it anymore. Are you here to ask about the secret of the hidden race? Ask quickly. By this time, this most important problem was almost solved. Lily looked at Luzioki who was crying like a child. I remembered the ominous scene I had just seen under the influence of Higanbana. Suddenly I didn't want to ask immediately. She ignored Luzioki's hopeful eyes and asked. You. Luzioki nodded desperately. Are you going to ask about the origin of Medusa and the reason for the formation of the Lost Land? Why are you standing here without turning around? Luzioki had bright eyes. As soon as Lily's words came out, it suddenly dimmed. His shoulders even dropped weakly, and Lily suppressed a smile. Why are you pretending to be mysterious? Luzioki paused for a while, not wanting to answer Lily's question, but seeing the unkind look on Lily's face, he trembled again. Do you think I want to? After he finished speaking, he said reluctantly, I was tricked into coming to this place. Lily sneered and stared at him. Seeing that Lily didn't seem to believe it, Luzioki couldn't help but repeat anxiously, I was really deceived into this place. If I could leave, I would have left long ago, but my natural ability can only allow me to leave this place temporarily, and there are too few things in this place that can be used as carriers. He muttered some explanations, looking heartbroken. I made a bet with Athena. They were originally children of God the Father, and they each agreed that one would inherit the throne of God and the other would manage hell. Seeing that he could no longer hide it, the Lord of the Netherworld had no choice but to bite the bullet and speak. This cunning, despicable, and shameless woman brought me to this hellish place and asked me if I wanted to face the river or turn my back to the river. He was stupid and easy to be fooled when he found something on the river. When there was a ghost, and the boatman on the river was transporting ghosts, he naturally chose to turn around and not look at it without hesitation. Little did he know that this was the choice he made. As a result, he was left in this place forever as if he had been cursed. His body always has his back to the river, standing among the flowers on the other side. Occasionally, he can leave this place in a way similar to Lily's understanding of soul possession, but the carriers used to get out are very fragile. So, you stay here, and Athena will stay in the temple forever. Lily's brows jumped as she looked at the Lord of the Netherworld, who was crying and had no self-respect at all. Yes, the Lord of the Netherworld nodded. He has been here since the beginning of the game setting. Thousands of years have passed since the game was set. In other words, for players, the most important thing is to enter the game. In reality, it only takes a few months, but for these NPCs with stories in the game, in fact, they have been standing in this place for thousands of years. From this point of view, Luzioki was indeed quite unlucky. And that cunning woman, in order to prevent me from escaping, built a temple above the hell of the underworld to guard me. When he said this, he became angry again. No one wants to stay in this place, but when Father God asked the two to make a choice, he was deceived by Athena and chose the hell of the underworld. The original choice seemed like a curse later. Before the Lord of the Netherworld appeared, he could never leave this place. But it is not easy for a new Lord of the Netherworld to appear. It must be a symbol of strength and wisdom. This was also an oath that Athena forced him to make in order to prevent him from escaping from the Netherworld. And in order to prevent him from taking advantage of the loopholes, Athena herself built the temple on the land of the Netherworld. In addition to breaking the statue of Athena, she also needed to defeat the people in the temple before she could have the ability to enter the land of the Netherworld. Only by defeating the skeletons and zombies here, as well as the money-grubbing old man rowing the boat, can we finally reach the other shore. The last level is naturally about the experiment on the flower of the other side. In fact, after smelling the fragrance of the flower of the other side, you almost enter a new world. It is not easy for ordinary people to wake up. Lily wakes up so quickly. In fact, the willpower is very powerful for the Netherworld. The Lord was surprised. After hearing what he said, Lily pondered for a long time. No matter how hard I am, you can still escape. So you used Luzioki's identity to lure me to find Emily and lift the seal in my body, right? Yes. When Luzioki said this, he nodded triumphantly. No matter how hard she sees, I still have a way. He used the power of the Netherworld day after day to penetrate the land of the Netherworld. The seal was passed into the temple above the head, and until the hard work paid off, things would always be successful over time. A female priest in the temple was seduced by the power of darkness, and after 10 months of pregnancy, she gave birth to a child. A daughter named Medusa. At the same time, this is also the source of tragedy in Medusa's life. She was born in an Orthodox temple, with a steadfast temperament and firm beliefs. She was born in a temple and lived in the temple since she was a child. She was determined to serve the goddess Athena all her life. She was beautiful and gentle in nature. Everyone who saw her was attracted by her. Her blood was full of love. It represents the two contradictory forces of light and darkness. If there were no subsequent accidents, she would probably become another high priest in the temple, serving Athena with her pure and clean virgin body for the rest of her life. But because of her beauty, she attracted the attention of criminals. A man broke into the temple and tried to woo her. Medusa flatly refused and ran to the statue of Athena for help, but Athena refused. The man raped her in front of the statue of the goddess. Under the humiliation, the hidden power sealed in her body exploded and killed the man. Athena resented her for losing her virginity in front of her, and hated her for contaminating her body with dirty blood. She also hated her for being a hidden race, and she still had a dark power that disgusted her. She was supposed to be her disciple. The bright girl suddenly turned into a person from the dirty netherworld. The goddess cursed her to turn into an ugly snake girl in anger. She could never look directly into the eyes of others. Anyone who looked at her would turn into a snake girl. As lifeless stone statues. She cursed Medusa to be unable to associate with others in her life, and not to have any companions or friendships. Her former beauty turned into an ugly snake man image, which frightened and disgusted people. Her hair turned into living snakes, and she was expelled and disgusted by the temple forever. Karen Company Programmer A, why can't the Lord of the Netherworld turn around? Karen Company Programmer B, Jubi will not say it is because of my plot setting. Author, I feel so tired, just let him stand like this. So we have a very cool back version. Luzi help, I'm afraid of ghosts. Programmer B of Karen Company, you are the leader of the ghost clan, how can you release ghosts? Wan, I heard that with the monthly ticket, Luzi was released. Luzi please vote. To be continued. Carrot.